let's get started. Today we're going to talk about not just LTE and wireless, as exciting as that is, but we're going to drill into sort of specific use cases and why you need to pick the right equipment for the right job. If you match the wrong router with the wrong job, you can do everything else right, but you'll end up with the wrong one. For instance, one of the examples I'll give is 5 years ago, we mounted one of the first IoT applications. It was a drone application, basically, where they had a bulldozer that was going back and forth moving coal, and they were controlling it with a cradle point router built for office use. The challenge was that the vibrations from the bulldozer rattled the cradle point apart in 6 months because it wasn't built for that. And so we replaced it with what we call a ruggedized router, and that had shock absorbers in it, and then it ran for 3 years just fine. As an aside, it was also 150 degrees in there, and there was poisonous fumes everywhere, so that's why they didn't have a driver in the first place. So we did everything else right, except ruggedized routers hadn't come out right. And then once we replaced it with the ruggedized, once we understood the application all the way through, it worked like a charm. So having the right signal acquisition device, AKA the router, is what determines quality many times. And we don't want to overbuild, but we certainly don't want to under provision either. And so those are the things we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about BroadSky. We've been at this since 2003, and we are a purpose-built wireless company. What we do is assemble and deliver wireless solutions. We have intentionally decided not to get into any other lines of business. We don't have any other distractions. And I like to say, if you only do one thing, you better be good at it. We're very good at this. So our job is to translate the LTE networks of AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile into a usable internet service anywhere that your customers go. Our roots are in satellite, and we've also been delivering satellite since 2003. A couple other things about BroadSky. As an objective measure of success, we've been on the Inc. 5000 list now 3 years in a row. And then we won the MSV Channel Futures Award in 2019. Our sister company is TechLink Services. This is a field install network where we can do a white glove install and actually physically install it. Two good reasons for this. One, in this day and age when customers they're really stretched thin and a lot of their staff is at home, we can go in and actually install this. And this is a no contact, no touch install, by the way. But the second reason you might want to do this is if you have to deploy 500 routers or 500 installations over a 3-week period, and they just don't have the manpower to do it, then we can assist in that deployment. And then finally, TechLink Solutions is our application development arm. These are the people that do custom software builds and also responsible for developing the wireless window product, which is a single pane of glass insight into all usage, router conditions, billing, data upgrades. It's really sort of an all-encompassing piece of software. And that's sort of the BroadSky family of companies. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about 5G, what's true and what's not. I know you're all seeing ads for 5G all over the place, so let's talk about that a little, and then talk about purpose-built equipment. We're going to dive into one case study on telehealth, get a summary, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So 5G, where are we at? The marketing is ahead of the technology. If people remember, and this is getting pretty distant, but if you remember back to 4G, 4G was promised incessantly in 2012, 2013. But it really didn't show up until 2014. The example I'll give is I remember seeing this ad was a mom holds up an iPhone at the kids' dance recital and grandma's looking at it on the computer in 2012. That was a great example of what the technology would be, but in 2012 it didn't work. Now they call it Facebook Live or they call it Periscope. It works like a charm now, but in 2012 it didn't work at all. So there's something about the cellular carriers where they like to market and create expectations of what's going to happen ahead of time, but the wrinkle is that they say that you can do it now. The reality of 5G is this. They have to put up somewhere between 100 and 2,000 broadcast towers because the 5G signal actually only radiates out about half a mile. And so we need many more broadcast towers. And the second reality of 5G is that it doesn't penetrate buildings. And in fact, it doesn't even penetrate your hand. So there's going to be enormous numbers of antennas going up on roofs to get 5G signal in building. 5G is going to be amazing, but it's being marketed ahead of the curve. And that's just the way it goes. However, the buildup for 5G is what's called MIMO, or massive in, massive out, where you take multiple frequency channels from one carrier and you combine them together. And that's available today. So 5G is in the future, but cellular going faster is happening now. When I started doing this in 2014, if we got to 15 meg down, we were happy. Now we are engineering solutions that get to 100 meg down to 150 meg down off cellular carriers. And so these are the stepping stones to 4G. And what we kind of say to people is don't wait for 5G to learn wireless. Learn wireless now, because it is a wave that's coming, and fast speeds are available today, but it will take more engineering than just throwing a router out there and hoping. BroadSky is deep into the engineering side of current solutions, and we're going to be right there alongside the 5G solutions as well. So the path in this, Cradlepoint is focusing on second phase 5G right now. The new hardware that's coming out is the E300 to E3000 series. It's 5G ready. What's going to need to happen is they're going to need to drop a 5G modem into it when they're released. 5G modems are not yet in the field in routers. There's some in phones, although that's questionable. And again, there's maybe 0.5% of the country actually has millimeter wave 5G service. So we're into an upgrade path here, and we'll walk right alongside you to get upgrade path. If you want to put a router in the field today that can be upgraded just by swapping a modem out inside the router, we can help you with that. Then on the Peplink side, they're also doing hardware with replaceable modules that are coming out, or we can do carrier bonding where you can actually take 2 different signals from 2 different carriers and bond them together. We start to approach those 100, 150. I've heard engineering reports of getting maybe 600 meg down if you take 4 ideal solutions and bond them together, although that's really bleeding edge. But that 100 to 150 meg engineering is something we're well familiar with and is available to you. So if you think about putting a 1 gig fiber circuit in for somebody and running their business, if we're going to back that up with a wireless, we should put an engineered solution in there that can attain 100 to 150 meg down. Putting a 15 meg to 30 meg circuit alongside a 1 gig circuit isn't really backup anymore. The faster the primary goes, the faster the backup needs to be, because they're going to rely on it more and more. So purpose-built equipment, and some of the examples, I gave one already, but I'm going to talk about, we're not just saying that they're ruggedized. These are actually things that have a standard attached to them. So shock and vibration resistance is governed under standard EN 61373, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's railway applications have certain regulatory bodies, electromagnetic compatibility, and then a big one is oil and gas. Hazardous locations, which is called Class 1 Div 2. This is any sort of spark or fume-related environment. They have to be spark retardant so that they don't give off excess electricity in those environments. And if you don't do that, worst case, a regulator will show up and they will rip out your entire network. So if you want to just put routers in offices, that's a business, and it's a great business, but it really is a great business. But there's a whole nother line of businesses where you're bringing the internet to applications that otherwise can't get internet well. Oil and gas is one, solar, wind, construction companies, and general job sites, and then Internet of Things monitoring. But when you get into these more industrial applications, when you're monitoring things, not just connecting people, then you have a higher regulatory burden that you need to comply with, and you have a higher operating temperature sort of extremes that you need to be ruggedized. You need to have heat sinks in your router so that it works when it's 150 degrees out there. The other thing you need is the ability to accept what we call dirty power. A lot of times you have solar panels out there or generators out there, so you need a more beefed up ruggedized circuitry in order to take that electricity. If you want to get into working applications, not office applications, and they're very lucrative when you get into working applications, then you need to start bringing these custom built routers along. So we're going to get into a case study now on telehealth. It's just another application of where internet is jumping out of the office and out into the field. This is a mobile and temporary clinics application. It's a high growth industry, obviously. What they're finding is it's more economical and more equitable to take healthcare to the people versus forcing people to the healthcare. So you see these mobile vans, mobile dentistry, mobile vision, mobile diabetes, mobile all kinds of things moving into communities. But to do that, healthcare is a heavy application industry for internet access. So if you think about what's sitting there, they could be sending video images back and forth. They're certainly looking up their their healthcare management system and going back and forth. And doctor visits are precious on time, so you can't have a big delay in getting this information back and down. And then finally, again, speaking to regulatory burden, this is all HIPAA compliant still. Just because you're in a trailer doesn't mean that HIPAA rules don't apply for customer privacy. So we still have to hit all of those marks. What we would deploy in a situation like that is probably one of the more upgraded routers that, again, they're likely going to be running on either DC power or dirtier power because it's going to be generated from an AC power switch in the back of the trailer. And then the faster routers that will get 4 channels bonded together because you need that speed. And those things all combined, moving around with with the four-way carrier, because this thing is moving around, you're going to get better signal strength and better signal acquisition as you go into different neighborhoods. And so that's how we would build this. There's an application we're going to speak to on the next slide, I believe. Nope, one after this. So on this medical on wheels, if you look on the right-hand side, if they're going to be moving around a lot, we can even move into what's called an HD2 or HD4 if you look on the right side of the screen as you're looking at it. This is what's combining and surfing off of two different carriers at all times. The advantage of this is not only is it faster, but as you're going through different neighborhoods, certain carriers will have a predominant speed and be predominantly the stronger carrier. But then as you move out of that neighborhood, you move into the next one, you might start shifting over to that other one. And so now you're pulling signal down from two different carriers. In the HD4, you can actually be pulling down from all three carriers, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. And so you're always going to have signal regardless of where you're locating that particular day or as you're moving throughout the day. If you think about a mobile application like for buses or food trucks or any sort of platform that's moving throughout the city at all times, they're moving through different coverage zones and different strongest carriers every time. That's another great application for something like this, where you're always pulling down the strongest signal from one and then supplementing it with signal from the other two. So multiple carrier bonding, this is a more cleaner example of showing it just in a visual, where you can actually take LTE carrier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now there aren't 4 carriers, so you're going to double up on one. Sprint is merging with T-Mobile. I'm sure you've all heard that. As you move through different coverage zones, it will surf the strongest carrier and then supplement with the other two. And it's just a continually evolving signal strength acquisition as they do this. This is when I was talking about the speeds on this of 100 to 150 down. This is where you start getting into that. And there's some software limitations that are being resolved where you could actually start combining all 400 meg signals and get into the 300 to 400 range, although that's still in development. But wireless is very fast. If you want to hear one message off of that, it's not your 15 meg download from 2015 anymore. Wireless has gotten very fast. So the mark we're trying to hit on this, they have to be real time, they have to be HIPAA compliant, and then it has to be high availability. These are all three things that we're going to hit with that 2 carrier bonding solution. And then the Cradlepoint NetCloud Perimeter is an additional layer of security. So with NetCloud Perimeter, if we turn the Wi-Fi on the router and then the healthcare professional is just using a tablet, then that security is extended over to their tablet as well. So it falls under the umbrella of that security. And so a lot of physicians these days, or a lot of in-home nursing care, they're walking in with a tablet and they're doing what they need to do at that time. But if they're connecting to this device, the NetCloud Perimeter does extend out to that, and they're still secure end to end. Different application for, but again, mobile. This isn't healthcare, this is retail. Even before COVID, you were seeing this all over the place, and I suspect you're going to be seeing this a lot more post-COVID whenever that happens. The larger trend is that instead of trying to drag people to the mall, people are taking sort of almost the mall to the people. If you look at these 2 pop-ups from Adidas in the suitcase store, there's tens of thousands of dollars into these things, particularly the Adidas one. And so they take it to events, they take it to festivals, they take it to street fairs, they take it to wherever people congregate, and they become sponsors. Instead of just putting up a sign, they bring their entire sort of product experience with them. But to do that, they need to bring fast internet. And it's not just a fireworks stand, in the Kmart parking lot anymore. This is a retail strategy that was growing throughout 2019, 2020. And I suspect that it will be post-COVID, that this will be almost not the new normal, but it'll sit alongside the old normal. Where you have to bring these experiences out to people, generate buzz in person, and then sign them up to get onto the website and then buy through the website itself or buy direct, however they do it. But it's this omni-channel marketing concept. So any of your customers who are selling retail or selling product to consumers are likely either doing this already or developing a strategy for bringing it out, and they're going to need mobile internet in order to power it. And that's where we come in. We've done all kinds of these. I've given this example before, but I'll do it again. I had a guy call me up 3 days before a motocross rally, and he sells sunglasses, but he couldn't get internet. His current situation wouldn't work. We overnighted him a router. He turned on the Wi-Fi, and I think he sold 5,000 pairs of sunglasses over a 3-day period. So without us, he doesn't sell sunglasses at all, like that. We do that kind of solution all the time. If they're moving, or if it's temporary, or if it's an emergency, we have a solution for you. So On the 5G side, the right we set the customer expectations for that, and then success on the summary. Obviously, we're in the summary piece here. Success equals putting the right equipment for the right application. I want to ignore the left-hand side a second and just go over to the right-hand side. Selecting the right application is you're standing on the shoulders of giants, if you will. That's the last thing you do. The first thing you have to do before you even select the right router is you have to do what we call the gold standard. We would do this for any application regardless. So I was talking before about, sure, office applications are easy, but they're really not. It's just they've become easy for us. What you need to do is pick the right carrier for that address first. That's the most important thing. And then you have to terminate on high quality gear. I'm not going to get into category 4, 6, 12, 18, but the minimum we put out there is what's called a category 6 router, which at least bonds 2 frequencies together into one download channel. There are still competitors out there of ours running around selling devices from 2015, 16, because they're cheaper, but they're slower, and they're called a category 4. That's really not that important right now, but the minimum standard to get into this is a high quality signal acquisition device. The router is provided by BroadSky, and then move up from there. Otherwise, you end up with poor signal strength and poor coverage and a poor customer overall experience, solely because you picked the wrong router because you were trying to save a buck, honestly. And then you have to pick the right carrier, because not all carriers have the right thing. And then we cross carrier pool, so we pool everything together in one, and then we can actually get in and look at signal strength. We put dual SIM into every router so that if one carrier isn't performing up to task, we would switch over to the other one. This is what ensures a quality signal regardless of where you are, including the ability to see into it from BroadSky Engineering. And that's what keeps customers happy, and that's what keeps them ordering more and more services as we go. And then at the very bottom, you see 0 CapEx options. Just a little note on that. Our services, you do not have to buy the router. We bundle it all together. So it includes the router, the SIM card, the pooling, static IP, insight into the portal, sort of as one package. We're trying to sell wireless as a service, if you will. Okay. So now moving back over to the left-hand side, success equals the right equipment for the right application. If it's an office environment, then we would deploy something suitable for that. But once we start moving, whether it's power or shock or spark arrest, or we need high speed or something that works in all areas as it's moving, this is when you get into engineering and picking the right equipment. And this is where we would want to engage with the end user as well to really talk about this. But this is what separates BroadSky from a lot of other people in this market who think it's a commodity and think it's easy and think that they can just put any SIM card in any router and it'll work. It doesn't. It just doesn't. It might work for one site, but for your lucrative multi-site customers who demand sort of a uniform experience everywhere, it won't. That's the kind of thing where you need us to do that for you. And so that's sort of the minimum, that's the gold standard from BroadSky. Okay. So we covered a lot. If you have questions, you can put them into either the chat box on the right-hand side or the Q&A. Either one, we'll just answer them in order. We'll answer Q&A first, and then we'll shift over to chat. So while you're formulating those ideas, BroadSky is a geographic representation sales company. And so if you're in the Northwest, Jim Miller's your guy, Southwest Maureen Donovan, Midwest is myself, Northeast Kevin Brennan, and Southeast Todd Hulsenbeck. And that's based on where you're sitting, not where your application is. So it's a nationwide internet platform. This works anywhere in the country. If you're on Canyon Gulch Road in the middle of nowhere, let's talk. But generally speaking, we can get signal. If there's people living there, there's signal. Let's put it like that. And it'll work great. Okay. So I'm going to go over to the Q&A, and I'm going to start with that. Okay, and I don't see any questions in the Q&A. And I'm going to go over to the chat and see if there's any questions over there. Or, Maureen or Mary, what is it? To unmute yourself, it's star?
Should be star 6.
Yeah, star 6
unmute.
if you want to unmute.
If you're driving.
Okay, let me just close the chat screen. Carlos asked, do you offer international services? Yes, it is. It's a different setup, but the larger answer is yes. And yeah, the answer is yes. I'm sorry, I just saw that Bo wanted to answer that too. Bo, why don't you jump in if I don't answer this properly? We can get you international service. It's not from AT&T, T-Mobile, or Verizon, however. We would be contracting with a international provider that in turn contracts with underlying providers in that country. The country list is very exhaustive. Central Europe, China, Japan. There's a gap in the Bahamas. I found that out a couple months ago. But beyond that, yes, we can get you international service. It is a more involved sales process. And so let's talk about it. I do want to mention, though, from an international standpoint, one exception to that would be Canada. Canadian carriers, we have contracts with all three carriers, which are Rogers, TELUS, and Bell Canada. And the service in Canada works largely exactly the same as it works in the United States, including being able to see your own portal. And the speeds are as good or perhaps better. So it works like a charm in Canada. It takes a little bit longer to ship it up there, but beyond that, Canada is wide open. Vinay asked, can you talk about unlimited data plan structure for pooled applications? So good question, Vinay. Unlimited it is a topic almost for a whole nother webinar, and I know you're all seeing unlimited options being presented everywhere right now. This is an evolving story, but for years and years, unlimited didn't mean unlimited high speed. Unlimited meant you can run as much data as you want, but it will throttle at X. Your cell phone typically throttles at 20 to 30 gig. And then it slows down to crawl speed. And when I say slow down, I mean it slows down to almost nothing, where it becomes incredibly frustrating. Business owners really generally won't stand for that. And so these unlimited plans are, again, they're being hyped more than the reality is. And we've seen numerous stories coming to Broad Sky, I would guess, from people who have signed up for unlimited plans on the side and then discovered they weren't, and they slowed down on the 16th of the month, and now they don't have fast internet anymore. We're also hearing about grandfathered unlimited plans that are disappearing. So the way Broad Sky does it is we establish a pool for all sites, and then all sites draw from that common pool. So as an example, if you have 10 gig per site and you have 10 sites, then it's a 100 gig data pool. If one site draws all 100 gig, that's fine. The bill doesn't go up at all. Because they're all pooled together. And it also doesn't matter who the underlying carrier is. Okay, and then Vinay also asked, can you comment on newly announced SpaceX-based satellite internet and how it may impact your planned device solutions? I was just reading about that, Vinay. Starlink and Elon Musk, they've got 400 up in the air now. We are watching this as interestedly as you are, but it is not, it's not a commercial service yet. And I guess my prediction would be if it's like any new rollout or Tesla, that the promises will likely be 2 to 4 years ahead of the actuality. That would be my guess. When we see it working live, we'll know more.
Yeah, and I would have to say we're well positioned if that is a viable enterprise service for businesses. We're very well positioned. As Broad Sky got our start in satellite, so we're very well versed. But the LEO satellite services is of great interest to us, but it's even farther out than 5G for us right now, but we are very well positioned if it in fact is a good business application for sure.
Yeah, it could be a game changer, and they're trying to cover the entire world. So it's an ambitious plan. Rich asked, what is the pricing for 5G? Do we have pricing lists available? No, I guess in all candor. 5G is really not an available service in any sort of production mode yet. Despite the fact that we're seeing advertisements constantly for it, it isn't a practical matter. I know they're advertising on phones, but other than that, it isn't something that is priceable, deliverable, or realizable. And that will be the truth in 2020. 2021, we'll see. I guess I'll reiterate something I said before. 5G is going to be a wave, and the time to get smart about wireless and all the things wireless can do is now, so that when people are calling about 5G, you're a practice expert, not just sort of learning about it. But 5G will be every bit as big as SD-WAN. And it's a good time to get smart. Okay, Alan says SpaceX
Tom?
2024. Yeah, Maureen, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you position it well. As far as 5G, it is not here yet, and it will be. We'll be very well positioned, but maybe you or Bo could speak to why BroadSky is uniquely well positioned for when 5G is available.
Well, Bo, why don't you talk about that, because you're deeper into 5G than anybody. Bo Barker is our VP of Technology, and he has a 5G phone that he has been test sampling in numerous places and has kept up on the curve. So, Bo, what are your thoughts on realization of 5G in the market?
Well, thank you. I think that, there's some primary elements that we're seeing kind of come together now. And earlier in the webinar, we mentioned Cradlepoint. A lot of people who were looking at this from a technical perspective were like, how are we going to get millimeter wave signaling into buildings when it just won't penetrate building material? So Cradlepoint went down the path that was most logical with a remote radio. And that radio is designed to tie into their existing equipment today, some of those models we mentioned. That's really important in that they have a design for this remote radio. They have the software to integrate it into existing Cradlepoint models. So it goes back to that right sizing the equipment. We talk a lot about gigabit LTE and what it can do. The reality is, if your hardware can't pass a gigabit of traffic and you're getting gigabit speeds, you have a bottleneck there. One of the other things that makes us really strong in this space is our partnership with our sister company, TechLink Services. I talked about those remote radios. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not something you want your clients crawling up buildings and attempting to install on their own. So that's where we come into play there as well. We have the field services, the expertise to get those remote radios, or millimeter wave radios out for true 5G deployments. So it's, there's a combination in the ecosystem, and we are well poised to be on the cutting edge of that and really help out clients with their path to 5G. It may make sense for most and not for some, depending on where they're at in the country. So just my 2 cents on that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I hit the mute button. If you're interested in this, just look up millimeter wave building penetration. That'll tell you a lot. Millimeter wave is what's driving 5G. I realize that we're being inundated with ads for 5G, and BroadSky's in an odd spot because we used to be the wireless experts, I guess, and people weren't that interested. But the information came from us and went out. Now you have this massive marketing arm from AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Apple, Samsung, talking about something that's coming down the path, and we certainly can't match their marketing budget. And so instead, we're answering questions that are coming from the outside, brought up by others. And then oddly, they have this tendency to exaggerate or at least promise ahead of the curve. Let's just say it like that. And so it switched over from us. But I think the larger concept for that we're all interested in is, one, the truth is the truth, and we know what the truth is. 2, 5G is going to be a massive opportunity. And so wireless can't be ignored. If you've gotten this far if you've gotten this far and ignored wireless, that's fine. But I don't think it's going to be ignorable in the next 5 years. And so the time to engage with the leaders in this industry, which are us, is now, because the 5G questions are going to be coming from everywhere from your client base. Starting now and really probably into the perpetual future. And so now is a great time to get involved in this. It's evolving, but this is like SD-WAN in 2011. You couldn't have afforded to ignore it in 2011. You had to learn the intricacies of it. And so, you probably wish you would have started sooner. It would have been a good investment of time to start sooner on SD-WAN. This is that. This is the first innings of SD-WAN, but it's 5G instead. That's my thought on that. Okay, I don't see any other questions that have come through. And so, Maureen, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's all great.
Okay, so again, just kind of reiterating the concepts, call us for specific applications, almost the goofier the better. People who are desperate for internet in odd places turn out to be very lucrative customers. And so it's worth a deep dive into trying to figure out if we can do it or not. And we've crawled into a lot of weird places and gotten internet signal to those places. I don't know if you guys have a bulldozer in a coal mine application, but if you do,
we have some experience with that. So contact your channel manager, please, in your region, and we look forward to talking to you. And then this webinar is recorded. We will send it out to all people who are invited, and then please look forward to our invite for next month's webinar as well.